Starlink is one step closer to commercializing their satellite-based internet services in India. So according to a report by Money Control, Starlink is all set to receive the Global Mobile Personal Communication by Satellite Services, or GMPCS license, after the DPIIT had clarified that none of Starlink's investors are from any of India's bordering countries. And Starlink has been trying to enter the Indian market all the way back since 2021, when they started taking pre-booking amounts of $99 from prospective customers, but at that time they didn't have the necessary licenses to operate in India, and so the DOT, the Department of Telecommunications, had asked them to refund that amount and apply for the necessary licenses. And so that's around the time that Starlink went back and applied for GMPCS in 2022, and now they're actually only the third company to receive this license after Jio Satellite Communications and Airtel's OneWeb. However, this license might not be enough for Starlink to officially get started in India, because the company actually still needs to get approval from InSpace, the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, to set up their Earth stations. And then even once that's done, once they've physically set up these Earth stations on the ground in India, they're still going to have to wait for the DOT to allot them spectrums so they can start offering their satellite-based internet services in India to consumers. That being said though, despite having a slow start, Starlink might still have an edge over Jio and Airtel when it comes to satellite-based internet. See, Starlink already has over 5,000 satellites in space for their internet services, while OneWeb has a much smaller network of just 630 satellites. And then on top of all of that, in case there are any gaps in their coverage in India, Starlink can just send up more satellites into space because their parent company is SpaceX. And then if we're looking at Jio as a competitor to Starlink, well, they're tying up with SES's O3B and O3B mPOWER satellites to offer their satellite-based internet. And going through SES's website, it seems like they have just over 70 satellites in orbit, so a far cry from the 5,000 satellites that Starlink has in orbit. All right, next up in the news, and this one is pretty massive. The government of India is allowing Indian companies to list directly on GiveCity's international exchanges, which are India International Exchange and NSE International Exchange. So up until this point, Indian companies could only list on domestic exchanges like the National Stock Exchange and the Bombay Stock Exchange, and were only able to raise money from Indian investors. Now, there were workarounds here. Technically, you could list indirectly on international exchanges through methods like using depository receipts, like American depository receipts or global depository receipts, but this was way too complicated, and most companies either chose to just list in India, or they would simply move their headquarters outside of India if they wanted to list abroad. And so what this meant is that Indian companies couldn't easily gain access to foreign capital if and when they decided to go public. And so oftentimes startups would just decide to headquarter themselves outside of India to avoid all of the headaches of the situation. They would base themselves in Singapore or Dubai or the United States, and this would make it easier for them to raise foreign capital during their IPOs and after they had gone public as well, for investors, foreign investors, to invest in their companies. But of course, this wasn't benefiting India. All of these companies headquartering themselves outside of India because these antiquated rules was not benefiting the country. And so now the government of India wants these companies to stay in India, and so GiveCity's foreign exchanges will allow Indian companies to raise foreign capital while staying in India. And according to media reports, Indian edtech startup Eruditus is one of the companies that's looking at moving their headquarters from Singapore to India. And so they're going to be joining the ranks of companies like, for example, Pine Labs, Auran, Razorpay, and Groww, who are thinking of doing the same thing. And this handful of companies are trailblazers when it comes to making this decision to move back to India, but I think with this GiveCity news, there will be a lot more Indian companies who are deciding now to move back to India before they go public. And I think this is especially good news for SaaS startups, where a majority of their customer base is outside of India. The transactions, the money that they're making is all happening outside of India. But in terms of their operations, their teams, and their identity as a company, they feel like they're Indian companies. And so by listing on GiveCity's international exchanges, they'll still be able to raise money from international markets where customers are familiar with them and investors are familiar with them without moving outside of India. All right, next up in the news, we do have an update now on Byju's. It's been a couple of weeks since we talked about what's happening over there. So according to a TechCrunch report, Byju's is willing to cut their valuation by 90% from their peak of $22 billion down to just $2 billion to raise between $100 and $200 million. Now, according to this report, Byju is looking to dilute 10% of its equity, and if they're going to raise just $100 million, remember they're thinking between $100 and $200 million, but if they end up raising just $100 million, their valuation would drop down to just $1 billion. But on the other hand, an ET report claims that Byju's valuation could be as low as $500 million. And this situation is made even worse by the fact that they just released their FY22 financials after a very long wait, and these financials are not looking good. The company posted revenue of 5,014 crore rupees, but they made a massive loss of 8,245 crore rupees. So, what do you guys think is going to happen here? Can Byju pull off the impossible? Are they going to be able to survive here by raising these funds, even at a massively decreased valuation? Or is it a lost cause and they're dead and they just don't know it yet? Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. All right, next up in the news, Nodwin Gaming, a subsidiary of Nazara Technologies, is fully acquiring Comic-Con India for 55 crore rupees. Now, this is a mix of cash and share swap deal where Nodwin Gaming will pay 27.5 crore rupees in cash and another 27.5 crore rupees in share swap. Now, why would Nodwin Gaming want to acquire Comic-Con India? Well, they operate esports events, which are mostly attended by young people, and so by acquiring Comic-Con India, they're going to gain access to an entirely new segment of 200,000 young people. That's 2 lakh young people who attend Comic-Con India every single year. Comic-Con India has also managed to grow their revenue tremendously after getting hit by the pandemic, so their revenue has grown from just 24 lakh rupees in FY22 to 16.26 crore rupees in FY23. That's a 66x jump in one single year. And I actually sat down with Jatin Varma, the founder of Comic-Con India, all the way back in 2019, and we talked about the story of how they grew Comic-Con India from 15,000 guests to 2 lakh guests, and that video only has 555 views, so if you guys are interested in checking out that conversation, then you can find a link to it in the top right corner of your screen. All right, next up in the news, Groww is facing some glitches. So on the 23rd of January 2023, a lot of Groww's customers weren't able to log in during peak market hours, and this issue lasted for an hour. It seems like these glitches are happening more and more often with these platforms. Zerodha faced a glitch back in December of 2023, and now Groww is facing the same thing. And even a glitch that lasts just a couple of minutes can wipe out a lot of investor wealth, and so it's not surprising that these investors are actually asking Groww to compensate them for their losses, which were caused by a glitch that lasted for almost an hour. Now, Lalit Keshre did take to Twitter. He's one of the co-founders of Groww, and he talked about what they could have done differently. He said, "We could have communicated promptly as the largest broker in the country. We should have been more proactive in communicating with our trusted customers, and we sincerely apologize for not doing this, as well as you expected us to. And so going forward, we're going to be more productive in sharing more details, both positive and negative." However, this isn't the only bad news for Groww users, because the company has also asked its users to stop buying US stocks from their platform, as they're planning to cease operations due to complications with the remittance process. According to a money control report, the company had already stopped onboarding new users for their US stock investing platform a year back, and there are around 1,500 to 2,000 users who are going to be impacted by this decision. All right, next up in the news, cloud kitchen company Rebel Foods has joined ONDC. Customers can now order food directly from all of Rebel Foods' brands through ONDC, and this network has now grown to over 500 cities across India, and they have close to 3 lakh merchants on the network. And this is pretty impressive. ONDC has come a long way, to the point where now merchants are delivering 6.3 million orders every single month through the network. And of course, this is still a far cry from the 50 million orders, for example, that Zomato does every single month. But now that orders through ONDC are reaching into the millions, it shows that people are starting to trust the network more and more, and trusted brands are opting to go onto ONDC. All right, now let's move into the funding news segment of today's video. And just a reminder that all of this stuff is going to be down in the description down below in case you want to access our Notion, where we put all of the funding deals that have happened throughout the week, or the funding chart, where we record the funding that Indian startups have raised every single week throughout the financial year. But anyways, now Indian startups have raised a total of $125.27 million, which is slightly less than the $135 million that they raised last week. But now let's take a look at some of these companies. So first up, we have Hyderabad-based NBFC lending platform Vivify India Finance, and they raised $75 million in their Series B round. After that, we have another NBFC, this one based in Jaipur. This company is called Namdev Finvest, and they've raised $15 million also in their Series B round. Then we have Thane based Inframarket. They're a B2B e-commerce platform for construction materials, and they've raised $12 million in a debt round. Next, we have yet another NBFC, this one based in Mumbai. It's called EcoFi, and they specifically focus on lending for green initiatives like solar and EVs, and they've raised $10.8 million. Then we've got Bengaluru-based fast fashion brand Numi, and they raised $5.4 million in their seed round. And then finally, we have another Bengaluru-based company called Stan, which lets creators and gamers build and monetize digital collectibles, and they've raised $2.7 million in their pre-Series A round. All right, that is all the startup news that I have for you guys this week. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in the next one.